what broke you, was actually preparing you, and God knew all along. Read that one more time. Not as a phrase designed to make you feel better about something that hurt you, not as a spiritual bumper sticker that sounds good but lands empty. Read it as a statement of fact about the specific thing in your life that you thought was the end. The thing that came apart in your hands when you were holding it as carefully as you knew how. The thing that broke you in a way that made you wonder if you would ever be the same again. Because you will not be the same, but not for the reason you think. What if the breaking was not the worst thing that ever happened to you? What if it was the most important? What if the moment everything fell apart was not God losing control of your story, but God beginning the most precise and intentional chapter He has ever written in your life? What if the pain you have been trying to recover from was never something you were supposed to recover from in the way you have been trying? What if you were supposed to be transformed by it instead? Most people spend years trying to get back to who they were before the breaking, before the loss, before the betrayal, before the diagnosis, before the door closed, before the person left, before the dream died. They measure their healing by how close they can get to the version of themselves that existed before everything fell apart. And God is watching that effort with a kind of loving patience that only a father can have for a child who is running in the wrong direction. Because He does not want to take you back to who you were before. He wants to take you forward into who He always knew you could become. You were not broken by accident. You were not broken by a universe that is indifferent to your existence or by a God who looked away at the wrong moment. You were broken by a process that was designed before you were born, carried out with surgical precision, and aimed at producing something in you that the unbroken version of you simply did not have the capacity to hold. And today, for the first time perhaps, you are going to understand not just that God was present in your breaking, but exactly what He was doing there. And it will change everything. Stay with this all the way to the end, because what God is about to show you through this message is not comfort for where you have been. It is clarity for where you are going. And where you are going is so far beyond where you were before the breaking that by the time this message is over, you will not want to go back, not even for a moment. You remember the exact moment. You do not have to think hard to find it. It is right there, stored somewhere just beneath the surface of everything you do, shaping decisions you make and words you choose, and the way you hold people at a certain distance that you never quite had before. You remember exactly where you were, what the light looked like, what the air felt like, the specific second when something shifted and you knew before your mind could even fully process it that nothing was going to be the same after this. Maybe it was a conversation that ended something you thought would last forever. Maybe it was a phone call that rearranged your entire understanding of what your life was going to look like. Maybe it was a slow accumulation of losses that finally reached a weight your faith could not hold the way it used to. Maybe it was a failure so public and so complete that you felt the version of yourself you had built over years collapse in real time, and you stood there in the rubble of it, not knowing who you were anymore without the thing that had just been taken. And in the aftermath of that breaking, you did what almost everyone does. You tried to hold the pieces together. You tried to function. You tried to keep showing up for the people who needed you while quietly bleeding in the places no one could see. You prayed harder. You read more. You sought counsel and community and every spiritual resource available to you. And still the breaking did its work. Still the thing that was falling apart continued to fall. And somewhere in that season, you asked God the question that every broken person eventually asks. Why did you let this happen to me? That question deserves a real answer, not a theological deflection, not a list of scriptures that are true, but land at a distance from the actual wound. A real answer about what God was actually doing in the specific season of your specific breaking. Because He was doing something. He was not absent. He was not distracted. He was not choosing to look away while something precious to you came apart. He was present. He was working. And what He was working on was not the situation you were in. It was you. The situation was the instrument. You were the work. The most important thing you will ever understand about your breaking is that it was not aimed at your circumstances. It was aimed at your character, your capacity, your calling, and the depth of your relationship with God. Everything that broke in your external life was the scaffolding coming down. And scaffolding only comes down when the building it was supporting is ready to stand on its own. You were the building, and God was removing what was holding you up from the outside because He had finished building what would hold you up from the inside. There is something that happens in the human soul at the moment of genuine breaking that cannot be manufactured by any other experience. It is not the same as difficulty. It is not the same as disappointment or discouragement or even deep sadness. Breaking is something categorically different. It is the moment when the last thing you were holding on to lets go, when the strategy you were using to manage your life runs out of road, when the version of yourself you have been performing for the world and sometimes even for God finally gives way under the weight of what it was never actually strong enough to carry. And in that moment, in the exact second of the breaking, something remarkable happens that most people are too consumed by the pain to notice. The pretending stops. The managing stops. The performing stops. Every wall you built to protect yourself from vulnerability, every carefully constructed image of someone who has it together enough to be acceptable, every subtle version of self-sufficiency that you did not even realize you were practicing, all of it comes down in the breaking, and for the first time in perhaps a very long time, you are simply and completely yourself before God, unguarded, unmanaged, unperformed, just you in the rubble, with nothing left to offer but your actual need. That is the moment God has been waiting for, not because He is cruel and enjoys watching you reach the end of yourself, but because the end of yourself is where He has always been standing. It is the only place the encounter with Him that actually changes you can happen. Every other interaction with God, the Sunday morning worship, the daily devotional, the prayer that stays at the surface because life is manageable enough that you do not need to go deeper, those are real and they matter. But they are not the encounter that breaks the old version of you open and releases what God placed inside you before you were born. Jacob understood this in a way that most people in the Bible do not talk about enough. He was a man who had spent his entire life managing situations to his advantage. He was a schemer, a manipulator, someone who had learned early that if you worked the angles right, you could get what you wanted without having to be fully vulnerable or fully surrendered. And one night, at a place called Peniel, God met him in the dark and wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And when Jacob would not let go, God touched the socket of his hip and broke it. He broke the strongest part of Jacob's body, the part Jacob was using to wrestle, the part he was using to hold on in his own strength. And after the breaking, Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. He was never the same physically, but he left that encounter with a new name: Israel, one who wrestles with God and prevails. The breaking was not punishment, it was promotion. The limp was not evidence of defeat. It was a permanent reminder that the most important thing that had ever happened to him happened in the place where he ran out of his own strength and encountered the strength of God instead. Your breaking is your Peniel, and your limp, whatever form it takes in your life, is not your shame. It is your story. God does his most important work in the moments of breaking, because those are the moments when the ground is actually ready to receive what he is planting. Hard-packed soil cannot receive a seed. It has to be broken open first. The breaking of the soil is not the end of the field. It is the preparation of it. And everything God is about to grow in the broken ground of your life has been waiting for exactly this moment to be planted. Most people think of breaking as something that happens to them, an external force that comes from outside and damages something that was previously intact. And in one sense, that is accurate. But the deeper truth about breaking is what it does on the inside, what it removes, what it reveals, what it creates space for that could not have been created any other way. Because breaking is not just damage. Breaking is also excavation. And what God excavates in you through the breaking is always more valuable than what was occupying that space before. The first thing breaking does is remove your false foundations. Every person builds their life on a combination of real foundation and false foundation without fully realizing which is which until something tests it. You think you are standing on faith when you are partly standing on your health. You think you are standing on God's provision when you are partly standing on your income. You think you are standing on the peace of God when you are partly standing on the stability of your relationships. And then something comes along and removes the false foundation, and the breaking you feel is not actually your faith collapsing. It is the false thing beneath your faith finally being exposed and cleared away. This is exactly what Jesus was describing in Matthew 7 when he talked about the two builders, the one who built on rock and the one who built on sand. The storm did not create a difference between the two houses. The storm revealed a difference that already existed. The breaking in your life did not create a weakness in your foundation. It revealed one. And the God who loves you too much to let you spend your entire life standing on something that cannot hold you sent the storm not to destroy your house, but to show you what it was actually built on so you could build it properly. The second thing breaking does is remove your false identity. Most people do not realize how much of what they call themselves is actually constructed from external things. Their role, their relationship, their reputation, their achievement, their position. And when any of those things is removed by breaking, the disorientation is profound because it feels like losing yourself. But you did not lose yourself. You lost a costume, and the person underneath the costume, the one God made before the world attached all of those labels to you, that person is still there. clearer now than before, more accessible now than before, more real now than before. The third thing breaking does is remove your false ceiling. This is the one that most people never see coming. There was a limit on what you believed was possible for your life. A ceiling constructed from your past experience, your current circumstances, your understanding of who you are and what you deserve and what God is likely to do for someone like you. And the breaking demolished that ceiling, not gently, not gradually, all at once. And it felt like destruction because you did not know the ceiling was there until it came down. But now the sky is visible, and what God is building in you has room now that it never had before. If you read the Bible looking for people who went from blessing to blessing without any significant breaking in between, you will not find them, because they do not exist. Every single person God used in a significant way went through a season of breaking that appeared from the outside to be the end of their story. And in every single case, the breaking was not the interruption of God's plan. It was the most critical component of it. Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. He had a dream from God about his future. He had a father who loved him. He had a coat that set him apart. And then, in a single afternoon, he had none of those things. He had a pit, then a slave caravan, then a foreign household, then a false accusation, then a prison cell. 13 years passed between the dream and its fulfillment. 13 years of breaking that looked from the outside like abandonment and from the inside felt like the complete collapse of everything God had promised. But here is what was happening in those 13 years that Joseph could not see and that you cannot see in your own season of breaking. God was building in Joseph something that the palace required that the dream could not have given him. He was building administrative competence through the management of Potiphar's household. He was building interpretive wisdom through the dreams of his fellow prisoners. He was building emotional maturity through the experience of betrayal and injustice that taught him how to lead people who had wronged him without being destroyed by bitterness. Every year of breaking was curriculum. Every season of apparent delay was preparation. And when the moment came for the fulfillment of the dream, Joseph stepped into it with everything he needed because the breaking had put it there. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness after fleeing Egypt. 40 years. He went from being a prince with power and position and a probable future on the throne to being a shepherd in the desert. From the world's perspective, his breaking was complete and permanent. But God was doing something in those 40 years of obscurity and wilderness that the palace in Egypt never could have produced. He was breaking the Egypt out of Moses before he could put the burning bush in front of him. Because you cannot lead people out of a place you are still emotionally attached to. And Moses had to lose Egypt completely before God could use him to confront it. David was anointed king by Samuel as a teenager, and then he spent years running for his life from the man who was currently sitting on the throne he had been promised. He hid in caves. He led a band of fugitives. He experienced betrayal by people he trusted. He made catastrophic mistakes. He wrote psalms in the dark that became the language of every broken person who came after him. And everything that happened between the anointing and the coronation was not delay. It was formation. It was God building a shepherd king, a man after his own heart, someone who had been to the bottom and back, and who would lead his people with the compassion that only someone who has needed compassion that deeply can genuinely offer. Your breaking fits this pattern exactly. It is not an exception to how God works. It is the very center of how He works. And the fact that you are in it right now does not mean God has changed His pattern with you. It means you are in the most important part of the story. While you were trying to hold the pieces together, God was building. While you were grieving what was lost, God was constructing what was coming. While you were measuring the damage, God was laying foundations. And the building He was doing in you during the breaking is so far beyond what existed before it that if you could see it now, fully and completely, you would understand in an instant why the breaking was worth every moment of pain it cost you. The first thing God was building was unshakable faith. Not the kind of faith that exists when life is working. That faith is real, but it is untested, and untested faith has limits that only become visible when the test comes. What God was building in you through the breaking is the kind of faith that has been tested at the deepest level and held. The kind that knows from experience, not just from doctrine, that God is faithful. The kind that does not require good circumstances to remain standing, because it was built inside bad ones. That faith is worth more than anything the breaking took from you, and it will carry you through everything that is still ahead in ways that nothing else could. The second thing God was building was depth of character. Comfort produces pleasant people. Breaking produces profound ones. The person who has never been broken can be kind and generous and genuinely good. But the person who has been broken and rebuilt by God carries something in their presence that the unbroken person simply does not have. A weight, a gravity, a capacity to be with people in their pain without flinching or fixing or rushing past it. When you walk into a room, something in the room shifts, not because of your talent or your charisma or your accomplishments, because of what you carry. And what you carry was put there by the breaking. The third thing God was building was specific capacity for your specific calling. The breaking you went through was not generic. It was precisely calibrated to the exact thing God intends to do through your life in the seasons ahead. The person who went through financial devastation and came out the other side carries an authority to speak to financial desperation that someone who has never been there simply cannot access. The person who went through the death of a dream and discovered God in the rubble of it carries an ability to sit with grieving people that no amount of training or education can replicate. Your breaking was not random suffering. It was targeted preparation for a specific assignment that only you, having been through exactly what you went through, are now equipped to carry out. God was also building your testimony, and your testimony is not just your story. It is a weapon. It is the specific, unrepeatable, impossible to argue with account of what God did in a situation that had no human solution. Revelation 12:11 says, "They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Your testimony, the story of what broke you and what God built in its place, is going to reach people that nothing else can reach. People who have heard every sermon and read every book and attended every conference and still feel like their specific situation is too broken for God to fix, and then they hear your story, and something shifts. because your story is proof that it is possible. Not theoretically, actually. Not all breaking is the same. There is a breaking that comes from living in a fallen world where pain is random and suffering is real, and sometimes things fall apart for no redemptive reason that is immediately visible. And then there is a breaking that comes from the intentional hand of God. A breaking that has purpose and direction and a destination built into it from the beginning. And learning to recognize which one you are in or whether both are happening simultaneously is one of the most important things you can do in the middle of a season of pain. The breaking that comes from life is real, and God meets you in it. He does not require that your suffering be theologically tidy before He shows up in it. He is present in every form of human pain, regardless of its source. But the breaking that comes from the hand of God has specific characteristics that set it apart. It tends to be precisely targeted at the areas of your life that most need to change for you to become who God made you to be. It tends to persist past the point where you think it should have ended, because God is not finished with what He is building, and He will not stop the process before it is complete, and it tends to leave you with a clarity about yourself and about God that you did not have before it began. Hebrews 12, verses 5 through 11, contains one of the most important passages in the entire Bible for understanding this distinction. It says, "Do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when He rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one He loves, and He chastens everyone He accepts as His son." It goes on to say that no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Trained by it, not merely survived it, not simply endured it. Trained by it. The breaking that comes from God is not punishment. It is training, and training always has a purpose that extends beyond the discomfort of the process itself. The clearest sign that your breaking is the hand of God at work, and not merely the chaos of a fallen world, is the presence of fruit that could not have come from anywhere else. The humility that was not there before. The compassion that has depth now that it lacked previously. The prayer life that has become desperately real in a way it never was when life was manageable. The sensitivity to the Holy Spirit that has developed because you have learned to listen for Him in the silence where no other voice was sufficient. These are not the fruits of random suffering. These are the fruits of intentional formation, and they are growing in you right now, even in the middle of the breaking, even before the breaking is complete. The other critical thing to understand about the breaking that comes from God is that it always moves toward something. Random suffering circles back on itself. It has no direction. But the breaking God authors has a destination built into it from the first moment. And even when you cannot see the destination, even when the breaking has gone on so long that you have stopped trying to imagine what the other side looks like, the destination is there, fixed, certain, already complete in the mind of God, who sees the end from the beginning and who never begins a work He does not intend to finish. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of this breaking that you have not fully met yet. And that person is so different from who you were before. Not lesser, not damaged, not diminished, but deeper and stronger and more real and more useful to the kingdom of God than the person who existed before the breaking began. And the only way to that version of you runs directly through what you are in right now. There is no detour. There is no shortcut. The breaking is the road, and the person waiting on the other side of it is worth every step of the journey. The person on the other side of your breaking will love differently, not more carefully, more completely. The breaking removes the conditions you did not know you were placing on your love. The fine print in your relationships that said, "I will be fully present with you as long as being fully present with you does not cost me more than I am comfortable paying." The breaking burns that fine print away, and what is left is a capacity for love that is not contingent on what it receives in return. That kind of love changes every relationship it touches, and it could not have been developed any other way. The person on the other side of your breaking will pray differently, not longer, differently. The breaking produces a prayer life that is no longer primarily a list of requests. It becomes a conversation, a desperate, honest, moment-by-moment conversation with a God you have learned to need at a level that changes the nature of the interaction entirely. You will not pray the same way after this, not because you have learned better technique, but because you have learned genuine need. And genuine need produces genuine encounter. And genuine encounter changes everything about who you are when you walk away from it. The person on the other side of your breaking will lead differently. Whether your leadership is over a family or a business or a ministry or simply the life you live in front of the people who are watching you, the breaking changes the quality of your influence in ways that nothing else can. People follow broken and rebuilt leaders with a devotion they cannot fully explain, because those leaders carry something, an authority that did not come from position or training or natural gifting, an authority that came from having been in the dark and having found God there. And that authority is felt before it is understood. Isaiah 40 verse 31 says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." That promise was not written for people who have never been weak. It was written for people who have been so exhausted by their season that the idea of soaring feels like a cruel joke. It was written for you in this exact moment, in this exact breaking. And the soaring it promises is not a return to what you were before. It is an elevation to something you have never been, something the breaking made possible, something God knew all along was waiting for you on the other side of this. You came to this message broken, or still carrying the weight of a breaking that happened months or years ago that you have never fully allowed God to speak into directly. And I want to speak to that weight right now with everything in me, because this is the moment this entire message has been building toward. What broke you was not the end of your story. It was the turning point, the hinge on which everything that comes next swings open. And what comes next is so far beyond what existed before the breaking that God has been protecting you from seeing it prematurely, because you were not yet the person who could carry it, but you are becoming that person right now. Through this, through every painful, confusing, faith-testing moment of this season, you are becoming the person God always knew you were. The lie the enemy told you in the breaking was that you were falling behind, that while everyone else was moving forward, you were being left behind in the rubble of something that used to be your life. But the truth is that the breaking puts you ahead, not behind, ahead. Because the thing God is building in you through this season is something that people who have never been broken simply do not have. And what you carry when this season is complete will open doors that your talent alone could never have opened, reach people that your gifts alone could never have reached, and produce a legacy that your ambition alone could never have created. God knew all along. Before the breaking began, He knew what it would produce. Before the first moment of pain, He knew what the last moment of freedom would feel like. He knew that you would question Him. He knew that there would be nights when the silence felt like absence. He knew that you would almost give up more than once. He knew all of it, and He chose this path for you anyway. Not because He is indifferent to your pain, but because He loved you too much to leave you as you were. Too much to let you spend your entire life standing on foundations that could not hold the weight of what He intended to give you. Place your hand on your chest right now. Feel that. That heartbeat is the rhythm of someone God is not finished with. Someone whose breaking is not their biography, but their preparation. Someone whose best chapters have not yet been written. And the author of those chapters is the same God who has been present in every painful page of this season, not watching from a distance, not waiting for it to end before He shows up, but right here in the middle of it, building something that will outlast every memory of the breaking that produced it. Pray this with me. Father, I release the narrative that my breaking was a mistake. I release the belief that I am behind where I should be or damaged in ways that limit what is still possible for me. I receive the truth that what broke me was in your hands from the beginning, that you knew all along what this season was for, that the person I am becoming through this could not have been formed any other way. I surrender the pieces I have been trying to hold together in my own strength. I open my hands and I give you everything, the loss, the grief, the confusion, the unanswered questions, the version of my life that I thought I was going to have, all of it. Build with it what only you can build, and let what comes out of this breaking bring you a glory that the unbroken version of me never could have produced. In the name of Jesus, amen. If this message found you today, it was not by accident. God does not traffic in accidents. He directed your steps to this exact message at this exact moment because there is something He needed you to hear that you were not hearing anywhere else. And the fact that you stayed until the end tells me something about you. It tells me you are not done. It tells me that somewhere underneath the exhaustion of the breaking, there is still a part of you that believes the other side exists. Hold on to that part. It is the most important thing you have right now. There is someone in your life today who is in the middle of their breaking and who believes it is the end of their story. Someone who needs to hear that what broke them was actually preparing them. That God knew all along. That the breaking is not the final word over their life. Share this video with that person right now. Not because you have all the answers for them, but because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone in the middle of their breaking is point them to a message that reminds them that God is still in this. Subscribe to this channel if you are not yet part of this community. Every message on Healing Faith exists for one reason: to find you at the exact moment you need to be found. And if you stay connected, God will make sure the right word reaches you at the right time every single time you need it. Leave one word in the comments before you go. Just one word. Prepared. If you are choosing to believe that your breaking was preparation, that God knew all along, that what is coming is worth what it cost. Type prepared and let the person who reads it after you know that they are not alone in their breaking, and that the other side is real, and that God is faithful, and that the story is not over. You are not broken beyond repair. You are broken open. And what God plants in open ground always grows.